Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this lesson on imagery. The essential question driving this lesson is, how does imagery improve writing? And the objectives are to identify imagery and to actually apply this to your own writing by writing using imagery. And the standards are Common Core 1470, which is writing using description. So what is imagery? Imagery is when an author or writer appeals to the reader's senses. They can use taste, touch, smell, hear, or see. It's a way to really add description to writing and to make the reader feel as though he or she is there experiencing the same experience as the characters. When we refer to imagery, we don't say, oh, that's hearing imagery, or that's smelling imagery. We have fancy terms for these types of imagery that actually make you sound more mature. When we refer to hearing imagery, or the description of the way something sounds in writing, it's called auditory imagery. When we refer to the way that something tastes in imagery, it's called gustatory imagery. When we are reading a passage that describes the way something looks, it's called visual imagery. When we're reading a passage that describes the way something smells, it's called olfactory imagery. And when describing the way something feels, it's called tactile imagery. So these are some words that you should become familiar with and use as we cruise through the rest of this year. Let's break these down a bit. Gustatory imagery, again, is a description of the way that something tastes. Okay, gustatory taste. Here are 3 examples for you. The sweet chocolate melted in my mouth. The sour taste lingered. And as I ran faster and faster, the salt ran into my mouth. Those are all sentences that describe the way something tastes. That is known as gustatory imagery. Here are some examples of olfactory imagery. Olfactory is smell. I could smell the fear as I walked into the room. Much better way of saying I was scared. The scent of flowers was overwhelming. Much better way of saying those flowers stunk. And finally, the sickly odor of illness pervaded the house. So writers use imagery to beef up their writing and add a lot more description and engage the reader. Auditory imagery deals with the sound of something. Crashing and screeching could be heard for miles. The baby's cry was shrill and seemed never-ending. The sweet melody of holiday music filled the store. That's auditory imagery. Visual imagery is when an author describes the way something looks. The colors of the sunset were gold and rust. Thick red juice ran from the side of the glass. She stood there stunned. Her blue eyes blinked only once. And finally, there's tactile imagery. Tactile imagery describes the way something feels. She leaned in to touch the soft skin of the child. Rain tickled my face with cool droplets. The heat was relentless. It ran through every nerve and vein. Now, I want you guys to think about maybe a movie that you've seen recently versus the same book that you may have read. For example, Hunger Games. I read Hunger Games, and every single chapter contains a plethora or a ton of imagery. That author is really good at using imagery to place us right in that book with Katniss. When they make books into movies, you have the visual, you have the talking, you have essentially the dialogue going on between characters, you have the scenery. So they don't need to use as much imagery as you do in writing. Using imagery is a really good way to improve your writing. And whenever you're stuck with something, just think, hey, what does it taste, touch, smell, hear, or look like? Right? Taste, touch, smell, hear, see. And you can add a lot of volume and power to your writing just by adding some elements of imagery. So we're going to continue working with this, but I want you to become familiar with it and take the quiz that follows.